Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna Prabhu, can we start now?
Yes, Prabhuji, we can start 8 o'clock. Okay.
Hare Krishna, devotees, welcome to the Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya on a Saturday morning. Today we'll be just continuing to read from the 4th canto, chapter 22nd, which is actually Ritu Maharaja's meeting with the 4 Kumaras. Today we'll be just covering verses 16 and 17, and we have the privilege of having His Grace Sri Bhagavat Prabhu. So, Prabhu, over to you.
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you very much. Dear devotees, welcome to Nityam Bhagavad Sevaya. Today being Saturday, it's a nice day, nice way to start the weekend. Firstly, I thank the team of Nityam Bhagavad Sevaya, Shankar Priya Prabhu, for giving the opportunity to talk about these verses. So it's from my own purification, and in fact, when I read this, I understood that this is beyond my practical realization, especially both the 16th and 17th verses. So I genuinely seek the blessings of all the assembled Vaishnavas and the Guru Parampara, so that I can speak appropriately on these 2 verses. So we'll begin with little invocation prayers on the Bhagavatam. We'll read the verses and then Mangalacharna, and then we'll continue to discuss whatever had heard from senior devotees, Maharajas, and from the books of Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Sloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nanda Gopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. Once again, I welcome you all. I'll share the verses for today's discussion. Yes. So we have, as my Prabhu mentioned, it's text number 16 and 17. So we have been discussing the chapter. Ritu Maharaj meets the 4 Kumaras. So text number 16. Vyaktam Atmavatam Atma Bhagavan Atma Bhavanaha Swanam Anugraha Ye Mam Siddharupi Charati Aja Vyaktam Atmavatam Atma Bhagavan Atma Bhavana Swanam Anugraha Ye Mam Siddharupi Charati Aja Vyaktam Atmavatam Atma Bhagavan Atma Bhavana Swanam Anugraha Ye Mam Siddharupi Charati Aja. Read the translation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is always anxious to elevate the living entities who are His parts and parcels. And for their special benefit, the Lord travels all over the world in the form of self-realized persons like you. To read the purport, very nicely written purport by His Grace, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Purport. There are different kinds of transcendentalists, namely the Jnanis or impersonalists, the mystic yogis, and of course, all the devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Kumaras, however, were both yogis and Jnanis, and finally, Bhaktas later on. In the beginning, they were impersonalists, but later they developed devotional activities. Therefore, they are the best of the transcendentalists. The devotees are representatives of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and to elevate the conditioned souls to their original consciousness, they travel all over the universes to enlighten the conditioned souls about Krishna consciousness. The best devotees are Atmavat, or those who have fully realized the Supreme Soul. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, as Paramatma, is sitting within everyone's heart, trying to elevate everyone to the platform of Krishna consciousness. Therefore, he is called Atma Bhavana. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is always trying to give the individual soul the intelligence to understand about himself. He is always with the individual as a friend, sitting by the side of a friend, and he gives facilities to all living entities according to their desires. The word Atmavat is significant in this verse. There are three kinds of devotees, namely Kanishtadhikari, Madhyama Adhikari, and Uttama Adhikari, the neophyte, the preacher, and the Mahabhagavat, or the highly advanced devotee. The highly advanced devotee is one who knows the conclusion of the Vedas in full knowledge. Thus, he becomes a devotee. Indeed, not only is he convinced himself, but he can convince others on the strength of Vedic evidence. The advanced devotee can also see all other living entities as parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord without discrimination. The Madhyama Adhikari preacher is also well versed in the Shastras and can convince others also, but he discriminates between the favorable and the unfavorable. In other words, the Madhyama Adhikari does not care for the demoniac living entities, and the neophyte Kanishta Adhikari does not know much about Shastra but has full faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Kumaras, however, were Mahabhagavatas because after scrutinizingly studying the absolute truth, they became devotees. In other words, they were in full knowledge of the Vedic conclusion. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is confirmed by the Lord that there are many devotees, but that a devotee who is fully conversant in the Vedic conclusion is very dear to him. Everyone is trying to elevate himself to the highest position according to his mentality. The karmis who have a bodily concept of life try to enjoy sense gratification to the utmost. The Gnani's idea of the highest position is merging into the effulgence of the Lord. But a devotee's highest position is in preaching all over the world the glories of the Supreme Personality of God. Therefore, the devotees are actually the representatives of the Supreme Lord, and as such, they travel all over the world directly as Narayana because they carry Narayana within their heart and preach their glories. The representative of Narayana is as good as Narayana, but he is not to conclude like the Mayavadis that he has become Narayana. Generally, a sannyasi is addressed as Narayana by the Mayavadis. Their idea is that simply by taking sannyasa, one becomes equal to Narayana or becomes Narayana himself. The Vaishnava conclusion is different, as stated by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Shakshadharitvena samasta sastre uktastadha bhavyatiyeva sadbihi kintu prabhoryeha priyevatasya vande guru Shri Charanarabindam. According to the Vaishnava philosophy, a devotee is as good as Narayana, not by becoming Narayana, but by becoming the most confidential servant of Narayana. Such great personalities act as spiritual masters for the benefit of the people in general, and as such, a spiritual master who is preaching the glories of Narayana should be accepted as Narayana and be given all respects due to him. We'll also read text number 17, the purport, and then we'll have a discussion on these two verses, important points in the verses. Maitre vacha pritos suktam akarnya saram sushtumitam madhu mayamana iva pritya kumara pratyuvachaha. Maitre vacha pritos suktam akarnya saram sushtumitam madhu Mayamana iva pritya kumara pratyuvachaha. Pritos tat suktam akarnya saram sushtumitam madhu Mayamana iva pritya kumara pratyuvachaha. Translation. The great sage Maitreya continued. Thus, Sanat Kumara, the best of the celibates, after hearing the speech of Prithu Maharaj, which was meaningful, appropriate, full of precise words, and very sweet to hear, smiled with full satisfaction and began to speak as follows. purport by Srila Prabhupada. Prithu Maharaj talks before the Kumaras were very laudable because of so many qualifications. A speech should be composed of selected verses, very sweet to hear and appropriate to the situation. Such speech is called meaningful. All these good qualifications are present in Prithu Maharaj's speech because he is a perfect devotee. It is said, Yasyasti bhaktir bhagavati akinchana sarvair gunaistatra samasate suraha. For one who has unflinching devotional faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead and is engaged in his service, all good qualities become manifest in his person. Thus, the Kumaras were very much pleased, and Sanat Kumara began to speak as follows. We'll recite the Mangalacharana prayers for invoking the blessings of the Acharyas. Om Agnanatimirandasya Gnananjana Salakaya Chakshurul Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Yam Rupa Katamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Advaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakha Vitamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namini Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paspyata Deshatari Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sundhubhya Evacha Titanam Pavanibhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namni Gauradvise Namaha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Krishna. Once again, welcome you all to the discussion of Bhagavatam verses. Stop sharing. So just to set the context, we are reading the verses by Prithu Maharaj, who is welcoming the four Kumaras. So in these two verses, which we have read, one is text number 16 and 17. So he is talking about or rather, is revealing Lord's mood towards the conditioned soul, the Paddha Jivas. And we see also the Lord's activities, especially in material world, are directed only for this one purpose. What is it? He is always anxious to elevate the living entities. That's what is mentioned here for his parts and parcels. And for the special benefit, the Lord travels all over the world in the form of self-realized persons. So by saying that, he says that Siddharupi Charati Ajaha. So Siddharupi, so he's also glorifying the four Kumaras as your self-realized persons. So you have come here to just show your mercy, and he's taking the position of a normal soul. So he himself is an empowered incarnation. So he's taking that role, and he's praising four Kumaras. And further in the next verse, it's basically Maitreya Rishi. He's actually glorifying Prithu Maharaj for his qualities, his qualifications as a pure devotee of the Lord, how he has all the qualities in terms of his speech, and of course, in other contexts, we have seen how perfect he is in terms of his behavior to the Vaishnavas, in terms of his knowledge while instructing to his citizens. So in this way, so we'll discuss on these points what can we learn and how can we meditate on these points. Also, especially this 16th verse, in fact, it's talking about Mahabharata devotees like Prabhupada himself. So we could dedicate the whole class in discussing about how Prabhupada has traveled all over the world. I will see how we can, we have been already discussing that in Lilamrita. We'll see how we can also include that in the discussion of these verses. So also we see that just to understand the importance of the interactions between saintly kings and saintly people. So we can clearly see that here that Prithu Maharaj's devotion, the success of his devotion is being highlighted here. So the success of devotion is said, it's mentioned in many purposes in many places that when a devotee is completely pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the result is it's among the many things. The key thing is association of devotees. So he's getting association of saintly people, and when saintly people come, what is their purpose? So that's what also is said in Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says, especially in 4th chapter, 2nd verse, which we quote often, especially during these times of book distribution and also in preaching. Evam param paraprapam imam rajarisho vidu. Rajarishi. So the mention of Rajarishi, there is a mention of Rajarishi. Rajarishi is saintly kings. So this is what the saintly kings do. Maharaj is setting the example. So when there are saintly kings, naturally saintly people who are attracted by those saintly kings, because they are always willing to give an oral reception to the message of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And when we see also when in this world also when two prominent personalities meet, especially heads of the state or people like this, I mean, and heads of the state meeting some other prominent personality, there's the interest all over. People are eager. What are they discussing? And naturally, when saintly kings and saintly people meet, there is only one point of discussion. So that is, in general, the saintly people are eager to instruct what is the importance of human form of life, how to lead one's life, what is one's prime duty. So these are the topics that the saintly kings discuss. And the saintly kings, what they do, they hear and they disseminate it, just like we've seen earlier also in the earlier chapter, how Prithu Maharaj was instructing his citizens. So that is the benefit of having saintly kings, and that's what Krishna is also highlighting in that verse. Previously, the knowledge was passed on from one generation to other through the via medium of these saintly kings. But naturally, as we see in the starting of the Bhagavatam, how there is mention of the slow passing away or slow, I would say, gradual decrease of the saintly kings, how this knowledge was getting lost. And that's why Krishna says there is a need for this knowledge to be spoken again, and thus he spoke to Arjuna as a benefit for the people, especially for the people in the Kali Yuga. And not only that, so we see that Prithu Maharaj himself is an empowered incarnation. We saw his instructions when we were reading the last chapter. They were in itself very full, complete, and powerful. But still, you can see, especially we had learned this last day also, how he's saying when he's approaching the saintly kings, he's saying, "Sampriche bhava etasmin, chema kenanja sabhave." I therefore ask you how in this material world we can very soon achieve the ultimate goal of life. So very soon, and he is expressing the urgency in how we can easily or soon get out of this material world, and he's putting himself in that humble position. So we can understand from Prabhupada's purport and in this to this verse, and especially the verse and our morning Bhagavatam title Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, and that Nashtaprayesha Vadrishu, Prabhupada mentions about two types of Bhagavats. One is a devotee Bhagavat, like person Bhagavat, and other is a book Bhagavat. So the reason it's mentioned by the acharyas why of course he's a great devotee of the Lord. He's always willing to hear from the devotees. But in addition to that, he is very much aware of this principle that there are two Bhagavats. One is the devotee Bhagavat and book Bhagavat. So what does the book Bhagavat contain? The book Bhagavat, like we are reading, it is all about the glories of the Lord, full of information about the personality of Godhead, his activities. But the person Bhagavat actually is a personification of the book Bhagavat. Is basically the Srimad Bhagavatam in practical life. So when Prithu Maharaj very well knows that by such sincere association of this person Bhagavat, one is sure to receive the transcendental knowledge very easily, more easily than one can all by themselves try to read the Bhagavatam book and thereby become fixed in the loving service of the Lord. So this is what Prithu Maharaj is also establishing this principle, and we know so it might kind of sound unusual or uncommon, but we in that same purport, and of course after those verses, in Bhagavatam we see the description of Narada Muni. Like Narada Muni in his previous life, when he was the son of a maid servant, he just by serving the Bhagavatas who were there at his place during the Chaturmasya period, just by serving the Bhagavatas, eating the remnants of their footsteps, he himself became such a Mahabhagavat devotee of the Lord. So that is the secret Prithu Maharaj knows, and we see in the earlier verses of this chapter his eagerness to receive them and to serve them. And naturally, when Prithu Maharaj was asking these kind of questions, in the next verse it says, "Prutostat saktam akarnya saram shustumitam madhu." So by hearing the Sanat Kumara, the best of the celibates, after hearing the speech of Prithu Maharaj, which are meaningful and like this, the qualities are mentioned, he smiled with full satisfaction and began to speak. Because it's not like Prithu Maharaj, since he saw saintly personalities, he spoke, "Oh, saintly people, how will my kingdom be? How will I prosper? Will there be good wealth? Will I have a good progeny?" So these were not the questions. That's why it is said they were meaningful, appropriate, full of precise words, and very sweet to hear. So these are again qualities of speech mentioned here. And Prabhupada mentions in the purport, because when a devotee becomes is as good as the Lord in terms of having the qualities. A devotee of the Lord is glorious because he has all the qualities of the Lord. So these are some of the points purely from this verses perspective that we could understand, and then going a little bit deeper into the purpose and connecting with the deeper theme, the bigger theme of this verse. So we could also see in terms of these question answers, we see the Bhagavatam starts by how the sages of the Naimisharanya ask 6 questions to Sutta Goswami, and he becomes very pleased. He says, "Munaya sadhu prishtoham bhavadbir lokamangalam." So what you have a question, you have very rightly questioned. I'm very happy with your questions, because these questions are worthy because they relate to Lord Krishna and are of so relevance to the world's welfare. So only questions of this sort are capable or completely satisfying. So these are the type of questions that one must ask in such gatherings, is what we see. And also just to see to just understand the importance of these kind of questions in Bhagavatam, also elsewhere we see when Narada Muni himself asked Brahma about who is you say you are the creator, but there seems to be another creator beyond you. So Brahma was not, his ego was not burst. He was very happy that someone is asking the right questions. And this is the right question, and this will help me to glorify the Lord. So these are the instances we can see, and in fact, we hear that how the Bhagavatam is structured. The Bhagavatam is structured in terms of question and answers only, right? So one devotee asks another devotee a question, and in response to those answers, there are several question answers discussions, and there are so many like nested loops of question answers. So this is the core, you would say, aspect in Bhagavatam, how the Bhagavatam is itself structured. So going further, so the point about the personality of Godhead, his anxiety, and his devotees, because that seems to be Prabhupada's focus also in the purport. So in the purport, if we see here, Prabhupada says the Supreme Personality of Godhead as Paramatma is sitting within everyone's heart, trying to elevate everyone to the platform of Krishna consciousness. And then further he says, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is always trying to give the individual soul the intelligence to understand about himself. So how is the Lord giving the intelligence? So there are primarily three aspects that we can consider. It could be many, but I noted down three. So how in terms of how the Lord gives the intelligence by sitting as a Paramatma. So one is, we can say, by the Lord's incarnation. The second is by the Lord's devotees, and the third is by the Lord's instructions. So we'll look into these three a little bit in detail. So the Lord's incarnation. So we know that the purpose of Lord's incarnation, Paripranaya Sadhana Vinashaya Sadhuskrita Dharma Sansthapanadhaya Sambhavami Yuge Yuge. And then later on he says, Janma Karma Cha Me Divyam. My birth and my activities are transcendental. So just by understanding this, one becomes free from the material clutches. So all the incarnations of God appear to give mercy. And we see that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is specifically incarnated to give mercy to the conditioned souls in a way that was never given before, right? So he is teaching us a level of devotion that is exclusive, that is confined, or that is an exclusive devotion, which is with his close associates or the gopis. So he's giving that level of devotion to everyone. And in a description of this, it is also said that Patra Apatra Nahi Vichara. So Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, or I think this is in Chaitanya Bhagavat. So this verse comes wherein when it is mentioned about the Lord's merciful nature, he's distributing the love of Godhead without considering the qualifications or disqualifications or the time, place, circumstances, the condition. He's just giving everyone. So, but still we see, so here Mahaprabhu has come, but here we say the Lord is always anxious. You see, the word is used, always anxious. Now, how to understand this? So we see we hear the material world is a place of anxiety. So we should all be eager and striving to go to the place of Vaikuntha. Kunta means anxiety, and Vaikuntha means there is no anxiety. We should all go there. But here we see that Supreme Personality Godhead is himself in anxiety. So what is his anxiety? So his anxiety is to deliver the conditioned souls. So when the conditioned soul becomes anxious, so why the conditioned soul is anxious? So he's always anxious. Oh, will I have what I have, or will I lose what I have? Will I get what I want, or won't I get? How to get? So these are the general anxious moments for a conditioned soul. And generally, material anxiety leads to depression. What else? Panic attacks or BP, the rise in BP, and these are all internal and then of no good to anyone, neither to the person who is anxious or to anyone in the society. But it only pulls the soul down. Whereas spiritual anxiety, the Lord, being the reservoir of all pleasure, is still anxious. Is still anxious, and the spiritual anxiety, the manifestation of spiritual anxiety is in terms of the compassion, is the mercy of the Lord. And that's what we said, right? How Mahaprabhu, what is his mercy? So that is what we discussed. And in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami describes in this chapter wherein Mahaprabhu talks about the transcendental tree of devotional service, or the transcendental devotional tree. He compares himself to a gardener, and he says he's growing the fruits of pure devotional service on this tree, and he's relishing it. But this tree is growing such an unlimited number of fruits. He wants to distribute it to an unlimited number of people. But he's saying, and this is where we see ekala malakara amikahan kahan yaba ekala vakata palapadiya vilaba ekala. I am the only gardener. How many places can I go? How many fruits can I pick up and I can distribute? It would certainly be a very laborious task to pick all the fruits and distribute them alone. And still, so Mahaprabhu is saying, still I suspect that some would receive them and others would not. Therefore, I order every man within this universe to accept this Krishna consciousness movement and distribute it everywhere. I am the only gardener. If I do not distribute these fruits, what shall I do with them? How many fruits can I alone eat? It is the duty of every living being to perform welfare activities for the benefit of others with his life, wealth, intelligence, and words. So these are the exact words of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that by the grace of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, who wrote this Chaitanya Charitamrita, we're able to read and contemplate today. So here we see what is Lord's anxiety. So the Lord, though He is capable, He is willing. I mean, in one way, He's depending on His devotees to help Him distribute this transcendental knowledge for the benefit of others. So that's why here is saying, it's mentioned, for the special benefit, the Lord travels all over the world in the form of self-realized persons like you. And this is what the Lord's anxiety is. And when the Lord is anxious, whatever the Lord does, naturally good comes out of it. When the Lord is anxious, His compassion and ultimate mercy, this special mercy has come out in the form of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So we can see how contradictory it is, apparent so-called contradiction, we can say. In Bhagavatam, when the Supreme Personality of Godhead is introduced in the very first verse, he is described as Abhigna Swarat. Abhigna means he is fully cognizant, and Swarat, completely independent. Swarat, he is completely independent. But we see here the Supreme Lord is completely dependent on the devotees. Why? He is completely dependent on the devotees to get to receive the love of all the devotees, not just the love of all the Mahabhagavata devotees, but the love of devotees like you and me, who are in this material world. It's not like the Lord has Yashoda, Nanda, the gopis, so many devotees. He is fully satisfied. Naturally, the Lord is Atmarama, he is fully satisfied. But still, yet he is hankering to receive the love from insignificant souls like us. And that is what is anxiety. So till that thing happens, he is always anxious. And to reduce his anxiety, Mahaprabhu is requesting everyone to take up to Krishna consciousness, and not just take up to Krishna consciousness, but to distribute the Krishna consciousness among the people. And that's what we see in devotees like pure devotees like Prabhupada and his disciples and many of his grand disciples. And that's what they're doing even till date, inspiring others to do the same, to go over and preach. So the go over all the world is contextual, right? For some, it is literally, like for Prabhupada, it's literally all over the world, traveling 14 times. And for us, it's like go over all the place that is within our radius of whatever 4-5 kilometers that we do. So this is what the Lord's incarnation, one aspect, how the Lord is giving the intelligence as the Lord's incarnation. And continuing on this topic, and the second aspect, we'll combine these two, how the Supreme Lord gives intelligence to the Lord's devotees. So here it is said that further, it's also a glorification, very beautiful verse and beautiful purport by Srila Prabhupada, it's also glorification of the pure devotees of the Lord. So here it is said in the purport, the devotees are representatives of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and to elevate the conditioned souls to their original consciousness, they travel all over the universe to enlighten the conditioned souls about Krishna consciousness. And this elsewhere is also mentioned, they're as good as Narayana. And Prabhupada immediately writes, what does that as good as Narayana mean? So as good as Narayana, and it's also Prabhupada mentions that as good as Narayana means because he's always carrying the Lord within the heart. So he carries the mercy of the Lord. So we just saw that, right? So what is that? So Mahaprabhu's mercy, we have seen that what is Mahaprabhu's mercy, and he wants to distribute that mercy upon everyone, and he needs people. And when these empowered representatives are there, he kind of invests his mercy in them so that they go and distribute that mercy upon all other conditioned living entities. So that's why we sing in Guru Puja, Jahare Prasade Bhai Krishna Prapti Hoy. And also Bhaktivinoda Thakur in that bhajan Ohe Vaishnava Thakur, he says, Krishna se tomara, Krishna dite paro, tumhare sakati ache. What does that mean? You have Krishna. Krishna is your property, and you have the power to give Krishna to everyone. So he carries the mercy of Krishna, and the analogy I've heard in this regard is just like how the clouds carry the water from the ocean, like the evaporation, they carry the water from the ocean and give the water in parched areas or areas that needs water through rain. Like that, these devotees, the empowered devotees, the pure devotees of the Lord, take the mercy of the Lord and give it to those people who are desperately seeking for it and who are not also seeking. So both. That's why it said in the purport, the main difference of the Uttamadhikari and the Madhyamadhikari is the Uttamadhikari does not make any difference. He just goes and gives. So that's what the qualification of Uttamadhikari is. And we have heard this many times, and because this point comes, I thought I would just repeat it, because a spiritual master, a devotee, a representative of the Lord should be given respects as good as the Lord. And once when Prabhupada was, I think he was received in an airport and he was being escorted in a Rolls Royce, and then later on in the reporters conference, he was asked, don't you think it's little show like ostentatious, which is basically showing off or not appropriate for a saintly person to travel in these kinds of fancy cars? So he says the Supreme Lord is so the representative of the God is as good as the Lord. So actually, what is this? He says this is not the proper treatment. This is a car made of iron. You should be taken in a car made of gold. It's your jealousy and enviousness that is making you talk like that. So he's making a point that is the Supreme Lord is sending his representatives, and when the representatives comes, they should be treated in a similar way. Like Prabhupada also gives the examples of the embassies, various countries in a particular country, how the embassies are the representatives of that country, and how they have to be treated in a similar way as the heads of that country. So, so that's what. And one more point we can also see in terms of how the lords are the devotees are the representatives of the God, is that because they're always carrying the Lord within their heart, the mercy of the God within their hearts, and they're always meditating on his mission, Mahaprabhu's mission. So whoever they come in touch with him, they also become pure devotees. We are seeing that in Prabhupada Lilamrita, how many people, either through his direct contact or through his books, became devotees. And a special mention of this is like I was hearing in one lecture that when Prabhupada first went to America in that Jaladuta, And when he reached the harbor, the Boston harbor, there was one coast guard who waved at him, looking at him as a foreigner. At that time, Indians were rare, and that too, he was in a different attire. So he waved at him, smiled at him, and just by doing that, and he's saying, the Prabhu is sharing this, he's mentioning that later on, 4 years later, he became a devotee and joined a temple. So that is how the potency of the representatives of the Lord is. And further, in this purport, we can also see how Prabhupada is mentioning that the karmis and gnanis are after their own self-interest, but the bhaktas or the pure devotees are after the self, or rather after the interest of the Lord. They are after Krishna's self-interest. They are not after their own self-interest. They are willing, because here it's mentioned, each one here everyone is trying to elevate himself to the highest position according to his mentality. But the devotee's highest position is in preaching all over the world the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is what we see in terms of how the Lord is giving the intelligence to this living entity, to his most confidential servants, the pure devotees, or the Mahabhagavata devotees. And it's not like, and not only here, we can also mention Prahlad Maharaj's point also, like because when in his offers, in his prayers to Lord Narasimhadev, he's offering that his words that for me, my Lord, I'm not at all afraid of this material existence, because wherever I am, I can be easily satisfied by absorbing in your thoughts and in your words. But my concern is for these fools and rascals who are completely engrossed in material enjoyment. And he also mentions that like how there are certain sadhus who are more interested in their own advancement. They go to places like Himalayas, and they become involved. They become engrossed in their personal sadhana. But it's really the real sadhu is one who goes to various cities and then delivers the conditions. So that is also, Prahlad Maharaj is carrying the same mood of a Mahabhagavad devotee who is taking that anxiety, who is taking the self-interest of the Lord as their own self-interest. And we see the same Prahlad Maharaj who later on in Chaitanya Charitamrita comes as Vasudev, that he expresses the same devotional sentiment and the same feeling. He says that they are not interested. Like, my heart breaks down when I see these conditioned souls who are suffering due to forgetfulness of you, and who are basically like, who are not interested in you. So it's not just talking about people who are willing to receive your knowledge, willing to at least give an oral reception, but they are not getting a chance. It's not like that. He's mainly talking about the people who are not even at all interested. So my concern is them. So I'm willing to take all their karma, all their sinful reactions, so that they can all be liberated. So this is again why we can see how the pure devotees of the Lord are true representatives of the Lord. And then going further, we'll talk about this one thing I'll skip. Yeah, I think, and then in the next 15 minutes or 10 minutes I'll talk about the book distribution and the importance of the original book distribution and the importance of books. So the third point I mentioned, like earlier, and how the Lord is giving the intelligence within the heart, from the heart. One is through Lord's incarnations, the Lord devotees, and the third is Lord's instructions, and of course his activities. So how these are carried forward? So naturally, in the earlier yugas, it was through oral reception. People would hear, they would remember, like we discussed in detail in the beginning in the context of these verses, how saintly people will come and talk about these aspects, the instructions and activities to saintly kings. And they would in turn pass it on to their citizens. But naturally, as the Kali Yuga progressed, the memory of people has dwindled. So these had to be put in a book form. So we see that's why the books have such a great importance. And if today also we see the books are the source of knowledge. And people consider, we see sometimes when you go to libraries, there is a book kept and then there is a lamp next to it. Book is considered a light, source of light, representation of God, knowledge, and so on and so forth. So that is how the Lord is also giving his intelligence to these books. And Prabhupada used to call these books as Brihat Mridangas. So through Mridanga, when we play Mridangas and Kartal, we sing, there's naturally sound that's coming out. So it can go only to a certain extent. But these Brihat Mridangas, this sound, or rather he used to say, because Brihat Mridanga means a big Mridanga, whose sound can be heard from very, very long distance. So that means these books go around, they will have a huge influence. The sound can be, the sound that is emanating from these books can be distributed immensely. So that is what the books have as an importance. And you see, not only in our Sampradaya, and especially in Kali Yuga, all the prominent acharyas have written. There are so many pastimes. Ramanujacharya, how he has gone, like there's a big pastime how he has got the books of his Gurudev, his Guru Parampara, and how he has put them in the book format. Likewise, many stories in our Sampradaya where there's a lot of effort put in to put all this knowledge into the form of books. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu specifically empowered the 6 Goswamis, and he has instructed, especially Rupa Goswami, to write books that brings out the essence of all the transcendental knowledge. So if you see, in our Sampradaya, what is the essence of all transcendental knowledge? It's condensed into these 3 aspects, right? Sambandha, Vidheya, and Prayojana. And Prayojana is like the supreme, pure, unalloyed devotion to Radha Krishna. And Sambandha, Abhideya, we all know Sambandha is the knowledge of the soul, and Abhideya is the process of the devotional service. So Mahaprabhu's desire was that, like we saw how in the form of a gardener, he was expressing his anxiety. And later on, he took, because people were not paying attention to him, he was a grihastha, he took sannyas, just like how it is mentioned in this verse, to travel all over the world, to give Krishna prema to everyone. And not only that, his instruction was, Jare deko tare Krishna Upadesh, Amara Ajnaya Hoye Guru. On my order, become Guru. And that's what he did in South India. And he just said that his spiritual potencies were manifested. He manifested his spiritual opulences in the South India, especially in the Kurma Kshetra. He would meet people, he would make them devotees, and he would instead go and make others devotees. And that used to happen. And then they used to go to their villages. They on the instruction of Mahaprabhu, they used to make others devotees, and so on and so forth. And Krishna Kaviraj Goswami specifically mentioned, if you think that these are just some concoctions, no one can save you either in this life or next life. So that is what the spiritual opulence Lord himself, right? So he's going and delivering everyone. So Mahaprabhu's desire, so he's doing all this. So as it said, he's still anxious. So naturally, the books are one of the solutions, along with his incarnations, along with his devotees. The books which carry the instructions of the Lord is definitely a powerful solution. And he wanted, his desire was these Goswamis write this. And we see the role of Srinivas Acharya is mentioned. Srinivas Acharya was born to Chaitanya Das and Lakshmi Priya. Actually, he had no desire to have kids, but by the inspiration of the Lord, he had, and by the blessings of Jagannath, he had a son, whom Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said he is born for the only purpose of distributing the books. He will inaugurate the book distribution. So true to his words, so later on, when Jiva Goswami and others, of course, when the Goswamis wrote the books, then Jiva Goswami became the prominent Acharya for Sampradaya, and then he was overseeing, and then he instructed Srinivas Acharya, Narottam Das Thakur, and Shyamananda Pandit to take all the books that these Goswamis have written from Vrindavan. And it is said that the books they have written, like this Chaitanya Charitamrita and others, they came about 3 three bullock carts full of books. So these many books were written, you can imagine. And he instructed them to go to Bengal, and so that the devotees in Bengal will then translate and then distribute. So that's how the book distribution will happen. And then the story goes on, the big story. In short, when these three devotees, who are none other than the gopis of Raja, they're carrying these books and they enter the area of Bana Vishnupur, whose king was King Birambir. So they camp overnight for sleeping, and then during those days, just before their arrival, by somehow by the arrangement of the Lord, the king's astrologer tells him that very soon the world's most precious treasure, of course, his understanding of treasure was different. But he read it in astrology in such a way that he said that the most important treasure or the most precious treasure in this world is soon going to enter into your kingdom. So naturally, the king was looking for fortune, because it is said that he was involved in few wars and his kingdom was lost on treasury. So he was waiting for some treasury from somewhere, something, so that he could run his kingdom. When he heard that, he sends his soldiers in search of the treasure. And by the will of the Lord, they come and they see these three devotees sleeping, and then there are three carts of full. They think that it's some wealth, and they didn't want to disturb them, and then they steal the carts. So when these three devotees wake up, they see the carts are stolen. They become anxious. Again, they're anxious. So their anxiety is not what Jiva Goswami will say or not. Their anxiety is that these books have the potency to deliver millions and millions of conditioned souls who are rotting in this material world. What will happen to them? These books are the efforts of day and night efforts of our Gurudevs, like various Goswamis. What will happen to their effort? So they started searching frantically in and around, and finally Srinivasacharya heard a voice that, do not worry, you will get the books, will be found in due course of time. So their anxiety comes down. Srinivasacharya then asks the other two devotees to go back to their respective places, and he goes about preaching in that. And eventually it so happens that the king gets preached. I mean, Srinivasacharya is such an eloquent preacher. So he meets him, he becomes his devotee, and he wants to offer Guru Dakshina and says, what can I offer? Then Srinivasacharya mentioned this incident. Then Birambir becomes devastated. He just falls down at his feet and he says, it's me who has stolen. And finally, the books are given back. And in that ecstasy, it is said that they do arati to the books. They fall down. Srinivasacharya falls down, offers obeisances, Dandavata obeisances, offers arati, and then the book distribution happens. So that's how the original book distribution started, and then our parampara continued, right? So the books, our parampara's association with the books didn't just end there. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Narottam Das Thakur, Baldev Vidyabhushan, who wrote that Govinda Bhashya. So all the prominent acharyas of our sampradaya wrote books, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote many books. Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur, of course, he was instrumental in publishing many ancient literatures, and Bhaktivedanta Research Library in Calcutta is doing a tremendous job in restoring and putting all together in a library format. So what was his instruction to Prabhupada? The banks of Radhakund, the most sacred of all sacred places. So his instruction was, whenever you get money, print books. So that's what, and Prabhupada, being an ideal disciple, he took he understood the mood of his Gurudev, and he implemented it. I mean, we see how in Lilamrita, how he spent many years in Vrindavan just write Srimad Bhagavatam, and his efforts in the first volume of Lilamrita, where he was in the first lifetime in preparation, that chapter, where we see how he took so much pain just to go from back and forth to Delhi to Vrindavan to print Srimad Bhagavatam, so that he could go and preach all over the world. And eventually, when the time came, all he had was a bag of cereals and umbrella, 40 rupees, which can't be exchanged anywhere outside India. but a case full of books. And he started just that. He went all over, and he distributed and created this wonderful movement. And Prabhupada, in many instances, he said in ISKCON, all our activities are based on and centered around books, printing, distributing books, and preaching. So whatever our activities may be, but unless they culminate in this, we see also, right, what is the real, who is a true representative of the Supreme Lord. We discussed that in detail. We discussed the Lord's anxiety, transcendental anxiety. So unless this culminate, our other services culminate in taking a little bit of Lord's anxiety on our own head, so it won't help us. It's said that taking anxiety in Krishna's service purifies us or anarthas. And for pure devotees, when they take anxiety, it's in ecstasy. They become ultimately happy. The example is given of the Vrajavasis, the Yashoda, Mother Yashoda, how she is anxious of Krishna always, and each of that anxious movement increases her ecstasy. So that's how the transcendental anxiety is so sweet in one sense, and we should all be willing to take that anxiety, which, unlike the material anxiety, has no side effects. So with that, we wanted to, what I've covered, I'll just conclude. We discussed about the importance of the question and answers, the saintly kings, the discussions between saintly kings and saintly people. And then in detail, we discussed about how the Lord gives intelligence in terms of his incarnations, his representatives, true representatives. We discussed in detail about their qualities. And we discussed about through the Lord's instructions, which are in the form of books, are the guiding force, are the light or the torchlights. We say the light for the conditioned souls to go back home, back to Godhead. So these are some of the points that I could write down. And I would also share, like, one point I've heard about book distribution, that actually book distribution, Prabhupada used to say, like, some of Prabhupada's early disciples, or when Prabhupada used to hear that some of his disciples were considering going to Radha Kund and sitting there and chant. So Prabhupada chastised them. If you go to Radha Kund, you will think of money, you will think of women, you will sleep, and you will fall down. So you think by going to Radha Kund, you will be, instead of going out in the world and mingling with the materialists and trying to preach them, by going to Radha Kund, you will be protecting yourself. But you are wrong. You will be in the worst of the association. So what is that worst of the association? You will be in association with your mind. So that is the worst thing, worst enemy, and that is the biggest strength of Maya, right? Our mind. So Prabhupada said, instead of that, go out and preach. Preaching and going out and distributing books is a battlefield. And that's where also Mahaprabhu says that in the Kurma Brahmana episode, he says, you go and do this, I will protect you. So Prabhupada says, if we are doing this, we are on the battlefield, we are in a battle with Maya, and Mahaprabhu protects us. He protects us against Maya. So it's not by our chanting, whatever chanting we can do, or our reading of the books. It's by being the soldier. And sometimes we may think that, okay, these verses are only maybe for Mahabhagat devotees, for few devotees who can do, like even Krishna says, whoever preaches my glory are very dear to me. So it's not me, applicable to me, but it's not like that. So whatever effort we make, Krishna sees that, and each and every person who is willing to take a little bit of that transcendental anxiety is very dear to the Lord. I can also share one of the experiences. On one Vaikuntha Ekadasi, when I was doing that book distribution near Belandur, whole morning I was trying to go to people, reach out to people who are standing in the line. Nothing would happen. Suddenly I was there in the line. One person comes from behind and he says, talks to me, and then he says he wants 75 Bhagavad Gita books. I was like, what? Because he said, I want to distribute in to my friends. I need that. I need that to your, because we generally offer it at a discount price. So naturally, I had just few handful of books. I didn't know what to do. I had to scramble, and 75 books. Generally, a carton has about 20, 30, so we can imagine how many cartons. And sometimes there wouldn't be any books. So it's that the devotees say book distribution is the easiest way to understand Krishna and depend on Krishna. So with that, I think I'm already 10 minutes over. So we are in this book distribution month. So very nice verses to reflect upon and meditate. So please, if you have any, if there are any corrections, please correct, and any suggestions, comments, please also share your reflections. As I said earlier, these two verses are beyond my practical realization. Whatever I've heard, read, have said the same thing. So with that, I conclude. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you for the wonderful class. Some of the points, I know you just summarized, but a few things which came to me, I just wanted to put that. We talked about how the success of devotion is actually getting the association of saintly people. So the two kinds of Bhagavatas, there is the book Bhagavata and the person Bhagavata. And you very, very beautifully gave all the examples of, how actually, how significant it is to have the association of the person Bhagavata, because they are actually putting things to practice. Something was very nice. You also covered, as you said, also about the intelligence, how the Lord gives intelligence through through incarnations and through devotees and the Lord's instructions. And you talked a beautiful thing about how the anxiety, which the Lord also has, is actually spiritual, and he's so compassionate. He wants to deliver all the fallen souls, which is nothing but mercy and compassion. And then you talked about Mahaprabhu having the same thing in terms of, as a gardener, he wanted support from others. So he could do it himself. He wanted to glorify others, and he wanted the fruits of this particular transcendental knowledge, the holy name, to be distributed all across. We just covered this aspect of how the Lord's representative need to be treated. Even all the they should be treated as good as God. They should be treated with all that respect as you would treat God, and how the spiritual master should be seen that way in terms of their, and through the Lord's potency, they are actually, they can actually do inhuman acts. Things which you cannot even imagine. And you gave a wonderful example of how Prabhupada also did that. And you said that there is a genuine compassion actually for them, and they are basically selfless. They don't need anything, but it is just to they just travel places so that they can actually benefit the fallen souls. And the last segment you covered through the Lord's instructions coming by way of books, which was earlier through a disciplic succession only through oral reception, and subsequently Vyasdeva and everybody they just put on the literary incarnation through our entire Sampradaya and various acharyas. They have written so many books, which is basically to purify and get us back connected to Krishna. And you also use the word of Brihat Mridanga, which was actually called about by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, also about how this particular sound of the books can be heard from faraway places. And you just talked about the pastime of the original book distribution, where it was taken as a most precious treasure. And that pastime was very, very sweet to get that. And finally, you just concluded saying one very important aspect of taking anxiety in Krishna's service actually purifies us, and it actually increases ecstasy, which is a wonderful point. I think that should be remembered. And during this particular book distribution marathon period, I think this is very, very important. And this cannot be, we will have to, all the devotees will have to just come together to make sure we just make it real. And I've just unmuted the line, so I would request devotees to share their realization or ask questions. And there is just one announcement. Tomorrow we will be having the class live from temple starting at 8:30. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Sri Bhagavat Prabhu. Thank you very much for wonderful class and timely reminder on the importance of book distribution and the glories of book distribution, how we can travel, advance in the path of spirituality fast when we do a book distribution. That will give a lot of realization. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I think no other comments or
Yes,
questions.
we can conclude. We can conclude with Vaishnava pranams. Vancha kalpatirubhyascha kripa sindhubhyev cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Ananta koti Vaishnava Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I just end the session now. Thank you, devotees, for this joining today's session. See you tomorrow.